Kia ora koutou. We're live now, so we'll start the meeting. We have a quorum. We've already had a karakia this morning with the Regulation Hearings Committee, so we'll have Craig kick off with the Mihi this morning. Kia ora.
Pākaha, te ata ka hapara, te ata ka koro ki te manu, ka ware te kutu ko te ata nui, ka haraina, ka taki tūmeri he pōhe ao kawa te tihe I Māori ora. Te mihi tuatahi mihi ki nā atua kaharawa, ho mai o kaha, ho mai o aroha ki a mātou tēnei wā I nā wā katoa hoki. Ka huri au taka whakaro ki nā tini aitua, ka wei atu ki te pō, a e nā mate, o ea marae, o ea motu, o ea taki wā, haere, hari atura. Haere ki Hawaii ki nui, Hawaii ki roa, Hawaii ki pāmama, e nā mate, moi mai rā, apati hono tātou hono rātou ki a rātou, apati hono tātou hono tātou ki a tātou. Nā kai kaunihera, nā kai mahi, nā ringa raupa o tēnei kaunihera, nā memo ta hāpore, he mā taki nei, tēnā koutou, nau mai hara mai ki tēnei hui, ki tēnei kōmiti, te rautaki me te kaupapa here, nau mai, hara mai. Kia ora, Vicky, thanks for letting me do the mihi today, so just acknowledging our councillors, our staff and all the members of the public that may be watching online, and also to our councillors that are online as well. Good to be here, looking forward to our Strategy and Policy Committee meeting. Kia ora.
Kia ora. So we have a quorum present, and so the meeting's now open. Just to note, we have one apology from Councillor Mackenzie today, and we have Councillor Davies and Councillor Cranwell online. Oh, and Councillor Diche. Sorry, I'm struggling with my eye. I forgot my glasses today, but we'll be fine. So moving on then, conflicts of interest. Do we have any today? Looks like a no. We don't have any public forum, deputations or petitions today. I'm not aware of any extraordinary and urgent business. And we have no notices of motion, so we can jump straight in then to item 7.1, which is minutes from the last meeting. So can I ask councillors, has anyone got any anything they want to raise about about the minutes? So that's a no. Okay, so can I have a mover, please, for the recommendation to adopt? So Councillor Mackay and Councillor Ward. So we have a mover and a seconder. Can I have all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, kia ora. So then moving on to item 8.1. So these are the items for decision. And we have the Revenue and Finance Policy Review. Giles Southwell will come to the table to present this. So Director Corporate and Public Transport Services will introduce the report. So I will hand over to you.
Apologies, Chair. So yes, this is a paper following the request in the long-term plan, when we were developing the long-term plan to look at the revenue and financing policy. We ran some workshops before Christmas, and in summary, I won't go through the report in detail, but the workshops identified a range of issues, many of which were related to the revenue and financing policy, some of which were more related to what the money is invested in and spent on. There didn't seem to be a huge consensus in relation to the specific issues that needed to be addressed. So we've made a number of options. We're recommending that we do not undertake a full review of the revenue and financing policy, but there are a couple of other options available to council. But I would also highlight that there is quite a lot of work going on that is related to the revenue and financing policy. So things like the work on river rating districts, the work that we're doing in relation to the pest management strategy, the conversations that's going on in relation to the notice of motion on funding for wilding pines. All of those things will feed through at some point into the revenue and financing policy, if appropriate. And also there is as people will be aware, a significant amount of government change that ultimately has the potential to impact on the revenue and financing policy. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, kia ora. So do I have questions from the councillors around the table? Councillor Scott?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So, Giles, in terms of the visibility of changes that you may see in government regulations, are there any known yet, or are you just fearful that some are coming our way?
Nothing specific, but obviously the changes to the Resource Management Act and the way in which the organisation is thinking about delivering its regulatory functions in the context of that have the potential to impact on how and where we want to raise our money for certain activities.
And secondary to that, I guess, is that the signal downgrade by Standard & Poor's in terms of LGF fund monies, does that have any impact through our Treasury policy or our revenue and finance policy?
So for those councillors who are unaware, Standard & Poor recently, this week I think, announced a generic downgrading of the rating of local government in New Zealand generically. That obviously has an indirect impact on individual councils' rating, and it will be no doubt a factor that Fitch's, who we use to give us our credit rating, will take into account in terms of the circumstances. At this moment in time, I don't envisage that it would result in a downgrading of our rating, given that most of the issues are connected to the activities of TAs, but it clearly is a signal to the sector and the environment within which it's operating that it's challenging times at the moment.
Okay. Councillor Edge?
Thanks, Chair. Just a couple of quick questions. On page 22, there's reference to work underway already in relationship to river rating schemes. Just wanted to confirm that the work that's underway is the discussions that we had at the last long-term plan process about looking at a more district-wide rating system for rivers.
Yeah, that's thank you, Councillor. That's exactly what we're referring to, is that we know that work has started with a pilot or a trial, that's how it's described, in Selwyn, with the intention that may or may not be rolled out more broadly. That ultimately has the potential to impact on how we raise money from the region and for the TAs and the targeted areas within that to fund those activities.
Supplementary. Just the second question related to page 22, financial implications. The report sort of outlines option 1 and 2, and it's very clear that there are some issues that we need to consider going forward. I'm just thinking one issue that often gets raised is the use of natural capital, and we're fairly consistent with the use of that and what it's for. And that's highlighted both in terms of borrowing in the revenue and finance policy, but also in the Treasury policy that we have. And I'm just wondering, do you think should option 1, we create a pause in this assessment process, that the Treasury policy should also be incorporated into any thinking that we might as we develop this process further?
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I think that the option 1, which is pause work on the revenue and financing policy review, is meant to be a pause in relation to a fundamental review, any aspects of it. It's not about pausing any work that would impact on revenue and financing and the related policies. There is a strong relationship, obviously, between the Treasury policy and the revenue and financing policy. The Treasury policy is about how we borrow our money and how we invest our money and what council is permitted to borrow money for. Natural capital being one area that we have agreed and obviously that was agreed a few years ago. What it also, what it's very clear on is not borrowing for speculative purposes and not investing to game the market, so to speak. So clearly, whilst they are separate policies, one is about how we borrow and what we borrow for, and one is about how we raise the money for particular activities. There is a relationship between them, and if we are looking at one, if it has impacts on the other, we should also look at the other one in that context.
So I'll come back to Chair Pauling.
Kia ora. Thank you, Vicky. Thanks, Giles. So just trying to get a real good handle on, so we've got the two options there, option 1 and option 3 effectively in recommendation 5. Just to clarify, what is the sort of staff recommendation on what one of those works, and are there particular reasons why one is more recommended than the other?
So staff recommendation would be option 1 in terms of, in no particular order, but there was no consensus on the specific issues that councillors wanted addressed, which therefore has a potential outcome that we spend a lot of time and effort to not reach consensus on the changes that are required. Second is that it would require significant time and effort from both staff and councillors to input at a time when we have a number of other significant priorities to focus on. And thirdly, that it doesn't preclude the work that is already going on that relates to the revenue and finance, which we've tried to outline in the report, such as the river rating district. It also doesn't preclude a review being undertaken at a further date, and as a minimum, there will be an opportunity to highlight particular areas through the long-term plan process. And obviously we have highlighted the conversation that I know councillors had around how we calculate UAGC, which is something that could be changed at the next LTP, or at least debated as part of that conversation.
So just following that through, so if the council did do that, for the next LTP, if we don't do it now, is there going to be work being able to be done so that the next LTP for the next council is able to do that review, or at least a specific review, and ready for the LTP, or not?
What I would envisage happening is that we would be picking up those specific areas. So if there was a change needed because of changes in the legislation, or the change to the river rating approach, or there was an appetite to have the conversation around UAGC, we would be bringing that to the table. At this point in time, we would not be looking to undertake a fundamental, all-encompassing review of the revenue and financing policy, although I think that it would be appropriate to do that at some point in the future, maybe when the external environment is slightly calmer, which who knows when that will be.
So my question here is the notice of motion that I brought regarding looking at impediments within our policies. And there is advice, I see note 7, there is advice coming back to us about that. My question, I guess, is this, Giles, is if we had support for that, could we make changes to those policies outside of a full-scale review? Because the full-scale review, in terms of the reading that we've been doing on this, is that it's like writing War and Peace. It's a big, big effort. And so my question is, to councillors, I guess, around the table, is you want to be a bit more nimble in terms of trying to do things, then a full review might not be the right way to do that. Have you got an answer about a full review versus just making changes?
Ultimately, if the council wants to make changes to the revenue and financing policy, you need to consult with the community. My understanding is that does not specify, or is no different depending on the extent of the changes you want to make. So you would need to consult, whether you do a full review or whether you just want to make minor or small changes in summary. The way that that's normally done is obviously through the LTP process, so it's combined with the work that is done on consulting on the LTP. If in the interim you wanted to make some changes in the context of the notice of motion and the advice that we bring back, then my understanding is that you would need to consult with the community, and that could be done either as part of the next LTP or outside of that process. And my understanding, speaking to my colleague, is that the minimum consultation process is 4 weeks, but we normally allow 6 weeks, with obviously pre and post work being required on that.
Okay. On that point 7, recommendation 7, I note there's no time, there's no date there's no date given as to when that information will come back to us. Like, it's, can you put a date to that? Like, I prefer to have a recommendation with an actual, at least a date.
I'm not sure what date was in the notice of motion, if there was a date, but I have the draft advice in my inbox. So we will be bringing that back at the next suitable, once I've reviewed it, and I'd like to share that with a couple of people to make sure that that advice is sound. But I don't see any reason why that can't come back. I'm looking at my governance colleagues in terms of next meetings.
The next
that are
S&P
appropriate.
is in 4 weeks. That's like April. Would that be?
It'll definitely be ready by then. Yeah, I mean, it's, yeah.
So if we put April 20.
Well, at the late, yeah, I mean, it will be.
Yeah. So we just say by. So I think for that recommendation 7, if we say by April 25, and then we've pinpointed it at least.
I think the point here, Chair, is the fact that if we make any runway that we're talking about now too long, we run out of the opportunity to do things, and I'm just a bit wary of that.
Yeah. So I have some questions with this. So we have, just noting your, Giles, you talked about pausing the work, but actually 5.1 says stop work. And to me, there's quite a difference in that language. Earlier, when we talked about the recommendation and you discussed it back and you talked about pausing the work. So I just wondered, is it stop, or actually is this going to stay on the radar and have a mechanism to bring back to the next council, because some of the discussion here is around, that we can't see it through as this council. So is it essentially putting a pause on and having a point in time when it will come back early enough in the next council that the next council can make some decisions around this?
I think that the recommendation is to stop the work in the context of this that was initiated through the last LTP. Clearly, the revenue and financing policy will, at least a cursory level, be reviewed as part of the next LTP, because you will be going out to consult on the whole document. If council wanted to re-initiate some work, recognising that there is also plenty of work going on that relates to the revenue and financing policy, that could be done. I think it would be cleaner to stop this work, and if the new council wanted to re-initiate, then being really clear about what the focus of that work is. As I say, the workshops that we attended were useful, but there was not a clear consensus on the areas and the problems we were trying to solve by a review.
So on that, I mean, certainly one of the things around the biodiversity and biosecurity funding, that is something that I think has come up quite a number of times through this council term, and actually in the last council term as well. I did have a look at Hawke's Bay and Bay of Plenty, which are both referred to, and they adopted new policy in last year through their last long-term plans. And I noticed that one of them has wrapped the biosecurity for biodiversity purposes and biodiversity all into one policy. And then they have a separate policy around biosecurity for productive pests, or for pests that affect productivity. And so, it's interesting when you look at other policies to see how there are actually some things that, unless you sort of look and you're aware, and that's the process that this would take us through as a council, would be sort of, what are the options, what are the ranges? One of the things that was made, I had a conversation with the councillor, each of the two councils as well, to find out, because you refer to some of the things being a bit controversial. And one of the points that was raised was actually what made things controversial was that there was such a long pause between review of policy that then met with some really substantial changes. And so actually then that became political at the end of the process. So it was really saying actually you're better off doing either full review every so often, or actually maybe even more ideally picking up pieces and having it on a sort of cycle, and you look at these things and take them through councils. So I mean, is that something that you could bring back as a team, sort of some timelines? And I know it needs you've stated it needs external expertise, just a bit more understanding around the time frame it would take, some sort of sequencing in terms of the topics, in terms of the lining up with annual plan and so on, because I think it could just disappear again. And the next council at the end of 3 years will be having the same conversation where there's some things that they might like to do, but haven't sort of thought about it soon enough. Suddenly you're in LTP, but really by the time you're into the LTP, even though that feels like a long process, it's too late to be doing policy review of this scale. So is that something that we could maybe have a recommendation to bring back some further advice around that, just so that it doesn't just drop off the radar?
Could I offer? So the revenue and financing policy is ultimately is driven and reflected by what does the council want to do, and so if the conversation that you were indicating, Chair, around the linkage and the relationship between biodiversity and biosecurity, to me that is a more fundamental conversation that then, as a supplementary part of that, should have a conversation about and how do we want to fund it, rather than starting with how do we want to fund it, what do we want to do. So it might be more helpful if I talk to Catherine around how do we ensure that those policy reviews around the activities of the council ensure that they consider where does the money come from within the context of our current revenue and financing policy, rather than starting a review of actually what is a financial policy. Because to me, it's more sensible to start with what's the work, where do you want to fund it from, than where do we want to raise our money from.
Just on that point, we have the work that we already do, and I think the reason why it's been raised as a question at times is because it feels like there's a lot of work done in some aspects that maybe don't benefit the biodiversity so much, and that a lot of our activity, and yet it's being funded by general rates. So that is a finance policy discussion rather than a work discussion. But actually there's two parts, and I agree with what you're saying as well. There's sort of almost two things. So perhaps having a look to see what we might align and what particular things would make sense to do. It would be helpful to have something come back to us, but perhaps we can do that. I don't know if we need a recommendation for that, or yeah. So Councillor Mackay.
Just further to that, my understanding is, and I would just like it clarified from staff, is that the pest surveillance and management fees are set following the pest management review, which is going on. This has actually been an area that I've been concerned about, from different to you, and that fact I think targeted paid too much. But so that is correct, isn't it? So it would make sense to align up as you suggest.
That's my understanding, and that's why we highlighted that there is a process going on that then drives or informs where does the money come from and how we split between targeted and general rates.
Okay. Anyone else? Any more questions? Councillor Robinson.
Just a question of clarity, please, with regards to page 24, just the spreadsheet with regards to incident response pollutions. Do you have detail on hand on the general rate user pays, I guess the percentages of that? And because it says it's not an interest of review, and I'm wondering why that would be. Please.
That reflects the conversations that were had through the workshops in terms of the areas that were highlighted. I don't have that split to hand, but I can certainly provide it.
No, that would be good, thanks.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just wondering if any councillors have a particular, in terms of the conversation that I've just had, whether in terms of bringing some advice back to council around just framing up some timeframes. I think when the long-term plan gets picked up by councils, it's too late to be doing the level of detail of work that this needs. And so recognising where our work programme sits and where the finance policy review would run alongside the point that you've raised, Giles, around, there's some changes and we'll be looking at like the pest management plan, for example. At what point does it make sense to pick up and how does it fit into the various annual plan, long-term plan in the cycle? Like, does that...
I mean, if I could, through you, Chair, ultimately we should set aside a minimum of 12 months to undertake a fundamental review of the policy to align with that can be done outside of the LTP process, and many councils have done that. You can also do it to align with the LTP process. Now, the LTP process, obviously, we need to have completed it or have a view kind of prior to Christmas before we go out to consultation. So we would need to kick that work off early in that calendar year, recognising the commitment and the resource that would be required to do that fundamentally.
So, because what I'm thinking is, in particular, because we will be handing across to a new council, that having something that's holding in a place in our the report resolution tracker, that there's something that carries across, so it's a trigger to think about that and to make sure that it's looked at in time, at the right time, and that the options there might be for a sort of phased approach to this rather than do it all in one hit where the phases sit. Like, it would just be useful to maybe capture that, particularly if you've already been looking at this stuff and have then reached a point where it's a suggestion that we stop now, to sort of capture what we're hearing and to put some intentions in for it to be picked up again at an appropriate time. Whether we should put a resolution in to just have that in the tracker, and do any other councils? Is this just me on myself, or?
Chair, I don't think that we can have that. Sorry. Chair, I think that's a really good point that you bring it up, but we need to have that as a part of our discussion rather than as a question, because I think you've summarised a whole lot of things that I'm not clear about and concern me.
Right. Okay, so that's discussion. Sorry, I could get confused sometimes with which bit's where. So thank you. So I think that everyone's asked their questions. Yep. So Giles, you can leave the table. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Right. So discussion. So Councillor Scott.
No, I think that last statement that you made regarding the concerns are my concerns also. I think we're in an interesting time, probably the most interesting time in my nearly 9 years at this council table, given the fact that so much change is ahead of us, given the fact that there's so much pressure going to go on local government, not just this sector, but in a wider sense. And we talked about the Standard & Poor's rating, and those things will certainly affect us. We talked about, with a notice of motion, the opportunity for how nimble are you to change things to be able for the good of the ratepayers. And my other thing is that I'm considering pretty seriously a notice of motion about setting up a CCO, getting some advice from staff on that. Now, that again is another issue that revenue financing and treasury policy will have an influence on those things. So I think that what you're saying, if I understand you right, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Chair, what I'm understanding that you're saying, and I will support that, is to pause this. Let's get some timeframes in place. Let's look at where the hurdles are, and let's look at these wider, this wider basket, I guess, of issues that we have in front of us. Because, making a decision now and then walking out and forgetting all about it, I think the nuance of it all goes. So thank you.
Yeah, no, I think you've captured exactly what I was meaning there. And I think also the point around whether, is this something that should be done as a big lump in one hit, or is it actually there's some sensible sequencing that aligns with the work programme that we already know we have, and what we wouldn't do because we know there's uncertainty around it. So I think that would be useful to capture. Councillor Mackay.
Yeah, thanks very much. I'll just have a broad discussion here around it. I think that we just need to remember that this was a potential review that was asked as a result of our long-term plan discussions. And obviously the workshops were held and there was lack of consensus around that. Some people obviously thought there was no priority. Now I will say that there was a couple of areas here that did concern me, and mine was particularly around the biosecurity charging and what I perceive to be unfairness there. But I think that if we actually think back to the times that we've sat on council here as annual plan and long-term plan, some of these discussions always come up. Natural Capital Fund returns every year, whether it be an annual plan or a long-term plan. UAGC rears its head as well, and I can't see that it's not going to actually occur in a new council that sits in here, and there's every likelihood that some of the people that's sitting at this table will be back. So if there's issues that concern, they will be brought up. Don't see this as a priority, the review. I think that we're under the pump financially. Our staff are under the pump to do the works that we're wanting to get done. We're having some discussions around what is priority for the S&P workshops. They're coming up as well, as I understand. So I would definitely be supporting 5.1, and I'll be happy to move that option when it comes along.
Okay, Councillor Sunkel.
Thank you. I'm a wee bit torn between supporting option 1 or 5, which one it is, and the thought that we should possibly be looking at roadblocks or challenges and doing some initial work that identifies. I'm not convinced that we should be doing huge amounts of work between now and August, September, October when we go to election, because funding does follow. But if we had a clear understanding, and the new council had a clear understanding of some of those roadblocks to being nimble, I think that would be very, very useful. But I'm not sure that we expend a whole lot of money and time on something that could be turned around with a new council in only a few months' time. So happy to have something come back that looks at those roadblocks, those challenges, what could be done to make us more nimble and achieve outcomes, but I wouldn't like to see too much work developed on it, just so that there's good information when the new council comes in and can say, yep, that's what we want to do, go ahead, or yeah, nah, we want to carry on with the status quo. That's my point, I think.
Okay. Oh, Councillor Swiggs, I had, and then.
I was somebody who was quite keen to see this work progress. I just wanted to say thank you to the staff who've brought the paper back and the information from the long-term plan, because I do have a number of concerns around our revenue and financing policy, namely from a personal point of view. Really, I'll say again, it sits around that natural capital. I still fundamentally don't agree with raising debt to pay for OPEX. I think it's a bad cycle for us to get into, and I understand the counter argument to that, and I accept that there are different views around that, but it's from a fundamentalist point of view, I don't agree with it. And I do want to raise that the SMP Standard & Poor's and what they've released recently, they're basically saying debt is a big problem. I think it would be quite useful for councillors to see this, where they've reduced the institutional framework, lowered the rating for all councils in New Zealand, saying that debt is becoming a problem for local government, and they mention that debt's risen from 150% to now 190% of revenues for councils across New Zealand. I think we're sitting at around 140%. Am I correct? I can't remember. I think that's off the top of my mind. So we're actually okay from a debt point of view at this council. But if we're not careful, we will end up in some of these struggles that other councils are going to face. And this is this piece of information was directly related to TAs who are having to set up separate entities, which is why I do caution setting up CCOs, because they do end up becoming absolved into the wider debt that a council holds. It isn't the answer, and this clearly says that that's not the answer. So, I mean, even I'm quite keen to look at these things from a different point of view, but I'm being very cautious. We've got some big change coming in this in local government in New Zealand, and for our councils and other councils and the RMA and a lot of the work that we do, which is what this revenue and financing policy does look at. So, on the balance of all that, I would love to do option 3. On the balance of that, I'm going to have to change my mind and go for option 1. I do not think that this is a priority that this council needs to take up at this point in time. We need to understand the playing field that we're going to be operating in over the next 12 months. We need to set the next council up to understand that so that they can get a very quick grasp on that, so that we can then feed that in, or that new council can then feed that into a long-term plan, whatever that may look like. So from that point of view, I'll be supporting, and I'll even second it if Councillor Mackay wants to do that, the option 5.1 to pause it or stop it.
Okay, Councillor Burns.
Kia ora, thanks, Chair. I was actually going to support option 3 coming into this today, and it was based around the fact that it did come from our long-term plan, and if they came out of that, there was work to do. I think you too, Chair Southworth, have identified, presuming too that there are new councillors on board after the elections. You start at the end of the year, you go into an annual plan, and then before you know it, the LTP will be upon them, so within a year, and getting your head around a lot of that work and actually having it come to the LTP. I'm also a little fearful that it will miss that boat, and then it becomes this thing that sort of drags along. I also think, controversially, that we seem to pick and choose when the advice from the government about what they're going to change is important to pause or stop things, and it's not so important for other things. So I'm still not convinced that option 3 isn't the best option. But I did like, I think Councillor Sunkel had some nuance about at least having something in front of the new council coming in, I think is a really important thing. So the option is there for them to be able to move on it if they choose to in that year before the LTP. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Edge.
Thanks, Chair. Look, this is an interesting paper, and I agree that the changes that are being mooted by central government creates a huge element of uncertainty for our way forward and what we might have to concentrate on in the next few months and going forward for 2026. For me, the revenue and finance review process, I don't think it was a big concern to constituents during the long-term plan process. Obviously an issue raised by some councillors about certain aspects of concern, but overall I don't see it as a major priority, but we will have to address it in the future. And I do think there's an opportunity here to look broader than just regional revenue and finance, and to look at the Treasury policy as well. And the idea of CCOs, or how we the subsidiary loan mechanism, the borrowing mechanism, but also having a bit of being able to have a discussion of this with our audit and risk committee. The risks of us not delivering on our strategic direction and some of the things that we have to do is very important to our community. The issue of natural capital, for example, I've always been supportive of natural capital because it is a way of us looking and raising some money for delivering on our intergenerational planning documents. And this last LTP, it covered the regional policy statement, coastal planning, integrated planning, climate change adaptation, and going forward there will be other things. But we're in debt for a short, very short term. I think it was 2024, 2025. By 2026, my understanding is that debt will no longer be there, and that we are managing it from then onwards, or that shortfall. So I mean, it would be, we can clarify that in the picture as well. But the use of natural capital for that long-term planning frame, it's not a matter of what was I going to say? It's not a matter of reference in terms of our audit process. We are because we're consistent in the use of natural capital in the way that works. It's an approach that we can actually cope with in terms of the legislative requirements for the accounting legislation. And I think that's a good way to go forward. But I really think that there is opportunity to set the balance. And as Chair, as you said before, that there are other, I think you referred to another regional council that has gone through a lengthy process. And I had a wee look at that, and I quite like the spreadsheet, but a lot more thought, a lot more discussion, and how that's packaged up, the transparency of that process, and all the issues. So I think I will be supporting 5.1, because I think we do need to stop, but undertake some work for the next council as much as we can, and just have more discussion.
Okay. Councillor East.
Thank you. Like some other councillors, I note an expression of some concern about some of the content of the paper, and particularly items 2, 3 and 4. Whilst I have an element of support for option 3, it does concern me that in point 2, no clear consensus on the policy that we need to review. Similarly, public transport being not considered, and thirdly, we seem to have a propensity for forging ahead with some changes to policy in the face of imminent government changes to the Resource Management Act, particularly, which is exposing us to great cost in terms of further review required, or judicial review, or all sorts of other things that may arise. We've shown a lead, I think, in the regional policy statement that not a lot of sense in sort of spending a lot of time, money and energy on developing a policy that ultimately will need a lot of review depending on the outcome of government decisions. So in light of all of that, whilst I had some empathy for some of the items in 5.2, I feel that we are in a position that we can't justify the time, resources to actually forge ahead, and I'll support 5.1.
Okay, Councillor Ward.
Sorry, I have a bit of a croaky voice today. Must have picked something out in Waimea yesterday. I just echo some of the things that Councillor Sacknell, Mackay, Scott and East have just said. Is the word stop the right word in 5.1? Should that actually be pause? I mean, I'll just throw that out there. I mean, I'd like to thank the staff for bringing this paper to us. I just think that I will be supporting 5.1, because I just think with the current workload and the fact that, you know, we are in an election year and it would be a lot to get through between now and then. And I realise the changes around the RMA. I do get concerned, like Councillor Swiggs alluded to, around the natural capital thing. And I echo Councillor Scott's thoughts around a CCO. I think that would be a good way forward for this council. to have a separate arm, so overall I'm in support of 5.1.
Okay. And Councillor Korako, did you want to speak? Yeah.
I had no hesitation actually to support 5.1. And what's really interesting here is that it seems that most of us have come of age actually in the experience of particularly what the Crown does or what it's thinking of doing and what's actually in place now. And so I've based my decision on the fact is that we have no control, and it's not just the fact that, we get to pick and choose. It's actually about what's actually on the table now. And so that's why 5.1 makes a lot of sense, because of the fact is that why would we want to spend more time, costs and all of that, when let's just look at what we've got in front of us. And that's why the support of 5.1 is where we should go. Without further ado, are we going to move on? Sure.
I've got Councillor Scott would like to say something more.
Oh, no, you've got Councillor Cromwell there, but my question is, because at the start of this, and you look very strained in the eyes, was that you were going to foreshadow, say 5.1 was successful, you're going to foreshadow an amendment. Is that right? Is that correct?
I think so. And Councillor Ward's just re-raised the question about pause rather than stop, which there might be reasons why staff would prefer something that's very clear cut, but I think so we maybe could have stop as 5.1, but then have a second recommendation, which is a point in time to bring back sort of what's been captured here, but also get a sense. I don't think it would take too much to get a sense of the process and steps, the external support that would be needed, and get a bit more around that for the next council to bring it through. Councillor Tunkel?
I was just going to ask a clarification of Giles Southwell. I thought I heard him say that some background work would continue. So my question, do we need something else, or will that background work continue in the background in a sense? So it was just a clarification from Giles.
Thank you, Councillor. So what I was trying to convey is that there is quite a lot of work already going on elements that will eventually feed through into the revenue and financing policy that are not a fundamental review or a review of the revenue and financing policy itself, including in response to the notice of motion that Councillor Scott has put in, the pest management plan that we've talked about, the river rating review, some of the work that's going on in response to potential changes to the legislative changes proposed by government, and as we progress with things like Beyond the Deluge funding, all of those things will play into where do we raise money from particular activities. If I could suggest, if through the chair, that it may be appropriate to ensure that we provide a full briefing to the new council on the revenue and financing policy itself, what it's intended to do, how it's constructed, some of the concerns that had been raised by this council, to see if the new council has an appetite for undertaking a fundamental review, or whether they are satisfied with the work that's going on in the particular areas that we would highlight at the time.
Yep. That sounds like a really sensible suggestion. Does that go in as a recommendation, or is that something for governance just to note for the new council? Make a note. Okay, so can we note that? Councillor Chair Paul.
So that's a secretarial note, but it wouldn't end up in the resolution tracker, would it? Just a secretarial note in the minutes, is that right?
Yeah. Do we want it in the tracker? We could put briefing on. Okay, we'll leave it as a note. Okay. Yep, it sounds like it's a mechanism for notes to be tracked. It's just not as visible. Yep. Okay. And Councillor Cranwell.
Oh, you saw my hand there. Chair,
eventually.
Southworth.
Your little
squinting at the TV.
I know, I forgot my glasses today. It's causing me problems.
Unfortunately, I'm going to have to support 5.1. I don't want to, but I think Councillor Korako mentioned that we can't probably trust this government at the moment. I think they're still building the plane as they're flying, and that things change all the time. We don't know what the RMA is doing, and other things are happening out there. We might have to eat some Vegemite sandwiches and eat an apple at lunch because if this government gets their way. So on that note, unfortunately, I'll be supporting 5.1 because, and the other thing as well is we don't want to make a decision here that's going to put pressure on the next council, the new council coming in. So let them kind of make that decision moving forward, as kind of Giles mentioned before. Kia ora.
No, I'm going to put the next recommendation because that was still in support on the 5.1. No, we really need to move on.
Yeah, but just quickly, is that it's lucky we don't have a Hansard here. Is the fact is that that wasn't the point. My point about whatever regime's in here at the moment. It's actually just about the fact. It's a fact of life. It's a political fact of life. So it wasn't. It was more about understanding, the process and all of that, and why this happened.
Yeah, I think that your point was made, and
cool.
it was understood.
Yeah, well, just think about the foreshorn seabed.
So we've got. My sense is there's a general move towards supporting recommendation 5.1, and so we'll put that initially, but we'll go through the first. We'll put the first 4, and then we'll do 5 separately.
Yeah, Madam Chair, just one point. An earlier speaker reflected on whether 5.1 should say stop or pause, and I thought pause was probably.
Well, I'll pick that up at the next. But I flagged that actually early on, and then it got reiterated by Councillor Ward. So we'll pick that up when we get to 5.1. We can have that discussion at that point. So, if the first 4, I've got Councillor Scott is moving that. I've got a seconder, Councillor Edge. So all those in favour? Aye. Any against? No. So those 4 are carried. So moving on to 5. We'll put 5.1. Now that I had a mover and seconder for that already, which was Councillor Mackay and Councillor Ward. Do you have a... Oh, okay, you've picked up now. It doesn't really matter. Whoever. Councillor Mackay, Councillor Swiggs. Did you want to... Does somebody want to propose pause in there? Would you... Councillor Mackay, you were moving the one with stop, but would you rather see pause?
I'm quite happy with stop, given that we've got a note, as suggested from staff, that a briefing come back to the new council. And that, to my way of thinking and being through this process before, is more than adequate as long as it's reasonably early in the piece.
Yep. I'm just pondering whether we put the stop work and just add in there and bring a briefing to the new council. We've got the note, so we're fine with that. And the pause, because anyone particularly wanting to die in a ditch over the word stop instead of pause? No. So we'll leave it as it stands. Okay, so all those in favour? Any against? So Councillor Robinson against. Anyone else? So we've got again. Do you want that recorded? Okay, so I've got Councillor Robinson is against. I've got Councillor Burns as a abstention. Anyone else? No. So that's carried. So moving on, we've got item. Then we've got recommendation 6 and 7. So item 7 was suggesting we put an actual date we've got by the end of August. So now that that's written up there, can we move that? Right, yeah, 6 becomes... At this point, 6 becomes redundant, doesn't it? Because that related to item 5.2. all agree? Yep. And then 7 has now got added in, and so that staff advice that we have the date there of end of April. And so I don't think we have to do it as a formal amendment, do we? We can just move that one. So do I have a second for mover and seconder? So Councillor Sunkel and Councillor Ward. So all those in favour of 7? Any against? No, so that's carried. Thank you. Great. So moving on. So we now have we'll have a presentation. We've got the item 8.2 is the Braided River Revival, Whakahaumanu Ngā Awa a Pākihi, the 100-year river strategy. And I have Catherine Chalk will introduce this, and then we have Marie Willett and Bridget Lange, who will give a fuller briefing. So Catherine. Oh, and Sarah from the Rivers team.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted the opportunity to briefly introduce this before handing over to the team. This is the culmination of a long period of work, and I know discussions with the council started probably in the long-term plan for the last one in 2018, and the need for an overarching strategy that started to make sure that the council was taking a whole-of-river approach to its work in braided rivers, and it was specifically to make sure that the multiple values that the community and the aspirations of the community were taken into account in our management of the braided rivers across Canterbury. So that started back in the long-term plan in 2018 and was then brought through in the infrastructure strategy and into the long-term plan in 2021. So this work has been long in gestation, so it's really good to have it here today. And I just will note that it is a broad, overarching strategy, one that you had a really good workshop, I think, with just before Christmas around what you wanted to see in that, noting that a number of the other pieces of work that you also had been having discussions on then are then directed and overseen by this strategy, including the gravel management strategy, the land strategy, the individual braided river strategies. This is like I see it as a sort of a coat hanger to make sure that the work on all those strategies is integrated and feeding into the work and the way that you want braided rivers across Canterbury to be managed. So on that, I will hand over to Marie, Bridget and Sarah. I've got a few slides and take the conversation through.
Kia ora koutou katoa. I think Catherine's probably covered quite a lot of that. After workshopping the key components of the strategy, of the draft strategy with you in early December, we're now coming...
Sorry, can I just ask, Marie, could you move the microphone slightly closer? They're not as sensitive as what you think, turns out. No, I think it is actually they need to be put in the right place to hear.
Right.
Kia ora.
So after workshopping the key components of the draft strategy with you in early December, we're now coming back to you with a complete draft strategy. So actually laid out as a document and seeking your endorsement for it to be presented to Council for approval. The strategy is centred on a whole-of-river approach that provides for multiple values to achieve the long-term vision, the revival of the Māori of braided rivers, ki te kitai. As Catherine said, the conversations about a whole-of-river approach have been going on for many years, and the intent of this strategy is to make those conversations explicit in Council's work and show how the different parts will work together to produce that transformational approach that was sought. The strategy sets the very high-level overarching direction. It addresses the work in the 2 core services, excluding public transport, environmental regulation and protection, and protecting people and property from natural hazards in the CP and RH. It also includes our commitment to our treaty partnership of excellence and climate change action.
Kia ora. Just want to touch a little bit about the what it does and doesn't do, picking up on what Marie has already said, and where some of this came from as well. As we've said, it seeks a whole of river approach to all the work we do in and with rivers, and a lot of the elements of the strategy have been through engagement processes, and the content in the strategy draws heavily on the content of other documents that have been engaged on and approved by this council and previous councils, including long-term plans and the 30-year infrastructure strategy. It also includes content from the draft regional policy statement and the Runaka engagement on and input into that content, as well as the draft the gravel management strategy and that review process. We have had hui with Papatapu Runanga and focused on our rivers and their concerns or aspirations for rivers. However, as you'll note in the paper, we have not engaged directly on the content of the draft strategy itself. It's the engagement occurred through those other mechanisms. However, we would welcome direction from this council as to whether any further specific engagement is required for the document itself. As you'll see in the paper and in the strategy itself, this strategy is very much focused on integrated outcomes. It is about ensuring that people and property are protected and adapted, that the extent and natural character of Braided River revivals increases, and that mana whenua can exercise rangatiratanga. When we put those up there, we are aware that that there may be some tensions in order to balance those things. However, while we acknowledge that, we also believe firmly, and when we develop this with other people involved, is that those outcomes aren't mutually exclusive. And so everything we do needs to keep those in mind together and try and integrate with everything that we do in order to be able to maximise the multiple benefits. So we have the high-level outcomes and we've got a strategy. However, that's not to say that some of this work isn't occurring already. This integration that we are aiming for in this high-level strategy can already been seen on the ground. It becomes a lot more visible in the work programs themselves, and this will be delivered across multiple work programs. We already have examples where this has been practiced. For example, you've had briefings on the berm transition that was done under some of that COVID funding, and that's one example of how this approach is being integrated into practice already. However, as I've already said and others have mentioned, this is an overarching strategy, so there isn't detail in the strategy document itself about all the actions and how they're going to be operationalised. It's a roadmap to getting to a direction. The detail and the actions needed to operationalise that roadmap, by when and who has responsibility for delivering them, will be included in further project planning across, as Marie said, across those two core services. And it will involve staff from across the organisation working in alignment, also obviously with community and Papatapu Runanga. The other thing I would say is that in regards to that work planning, that itself would be, there'll be project planning, that itself would be appropriate to be subject to further engagement when we're talking about place-based on the ground planning around rivers. So that's another opportunity. Just to finish up, the next steps to be discussed what the next steps for this strategy is, but from here the view would be that if there was any changes required and agreed to by the committee, we will incorporate that into a final draft before a final draft would be presented to a council seeking adoption of the draft. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Councillor Korako.
Tēnā kōrua. I'm mindful of and look, I understand that this is an overarching document and there's actually a number of other sort of strategies and documents that kind of are under this. But I'm mindful of a briefing that we had in March 2023 about Braided River Revival, Whakahaumanu nāua Pākihi. And up one of the big things there was actually about the whole river approach, using Te Manawa Te Wai and also Ki Uta Ki Tai. And looking at this, and you're saying that it's a draft, you've gone through and highlighted the fact around the engagement, significance, Māori participation, and then you quote, "What's our future Canterbury? Let's pick a path." And then in number 26 on page 52, we know all of that, but then in that last sentence in number 26 that you're saying that there hasn't been any formal engagement with Papatupu Runanga. Doesn't matter whether it's an overarching document or whatever, there definitely needs, I believe, a formal engagement with Papatupu Runanga at the mana to mana level, which to me and a number of others is actually at Te Rōpūtuia. So I'm actually suggesting that before this goes any further, there needs to be that formal engagement, through at least Te Rōpūtuia, because that's really the place where it should be. You've got a number of other working parts within Papatupu Runanga, but the real mana to mana engagement with this document needs to be at Te Rōpūtuia. So kia ora, thank you. And thank you for the document, by the way. It's it is. It's quite comprehensive, and at least it's. I think it'll get a favourable hearing there, and also move it forward as to understand. They need to understand about the underlying part of it, though. Thank you.
So just to check, have there been anything raised with the Te Rōpūtuia team since this morning when that got flagged? Do we know if that can come back through the 21st of March Te Rōpūtuia meeting?
We can, with that, we were aware that may be something that was requested by the committee. In terms of the actual timing for that, and then taking it to Te Rōpūtuia, and then being able to bring it back and to this council, we just need to finalise the timing on that, and through the chair, if we can do that through governance, and the chair after this meeting, that would be great.
Okay, so just because that would, we have at the moment, the third recommendation gives us bringing this back through the 26th of March council meeting. So we might be better off to amend that date and look at maybe by whatever the council date is in May, perhaps, just to be sure we've got time. And if it can come back through March or April, so be it. But
yes, we wouldn't be able to do it in line with the timing and that recommendation. We'd need to amend the recommendation.
Yeah, I think we could just make the recommendation have that longer timeline so that we did, yeah. I'd like to, if we can have it added by a certain date, that would be, I don't like to just leave it completely open, but yeah. So then I had Councillor Sunkel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for these documents, and I'm reasonably comfortable with what I see in front of me and where it sits. I guess I just seek a wee bit, of assurance. We talk about Environment Canterbury's responsibilities, and in particular the protection of people and property. And I guess coming out of the lowland, civil defence and the like, you talked a wee bit about the tensions. Just, I guess, assurance for me that when we get to the bottom half of our catchments and flooding and those issues really come into play for communities, which are our towns, our farmers, our lifestylers, the assets that prop up a whole of Canterbury, that really is taken into account and not necessarily devalued in the view of the whole of Ki Uta Ki Tai. So just an assurance. Otherwise, I'm reasonably happy with the document. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I wasn't sure if it was. Yes, absolutely. It speaks through you, Chair. Your point speaks to the prominence that the 30-year infrastructure has into the strategy, that obviously this overarching strategy, and then there's other strategies, sub-strategies and programs that sit under it. And while the detail is not there, we are hoping through the objectives that sit under that outcome that it's showing that exactly what you're describing is still a key part in order to achieve one of the three outcomes in an integrated way. Obviously, flooding and river resilience is key to this document, and also key to being able to have this integrated with all the other work that's happening within CPRH. So.
I'm just going to flag who I've got on my list here. So I've got Councillor Burns, Scott, Mackay, Pauling, Swiggs and East. Edge. And this is questions, yeah. Yep, so Councillor Burns.
Kia ora, Chair. Kia ora, kai mahi. Nā kai mahi whakamiharo. It's great, but my question is, we've had quite a few briefings on the likes of making room for rivers. Now, I would understand that this is seen, I guess, as a mitigation, a resilient sort of solution, supporting community climate and wildlife. But was there any thought of putting the concept of that in here, given that you're taking this whole of river approach?
I think the outcome with natural character and extent, increasing natural character and extent of rivers, is the place where we would see that work become visible. That's the outcome that I think includes what you're talking about in terms of the room for rivers concept.
Can I just have another one? But is there any place, do you think, to have something a bit more sort of explicit within the text that you've got? It's quite, I mean, I don't want to get into the conversation, so I'll talk about that later, but that's the question I've got anyway. I'll leave it at that without getting into how I was going to try and get it. Yeah. So did you get that as a question? So the question is, again, was there any thought to putting something explicitly about the fact that if it's a whole of river approach, we're looking at outside the river as well as within the constrained confines of the current sort of stop working banking type system that we've got? Kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you. The answer is yes. We have discussed room for the river and rivers holistically, so beyond just the active riverbed. I will direct you to the outcome on the para framework as well as the natural character outcomes. So when we're talking about room for the river in a flood and river resilience context, we do see that as a part of the para framework. It's an option, it's a tool that we can use, and it's often discussed within the team as part of that.
And just to note, I think I'm right in saying that Sean McCracken, one of our lead river engineers, is a signatory or signed off on the Room for the Rivers report that has been done through the river engineering team. So we should have it well embedded, hopefully, because we're one of the experts in our organisation. But sometimes, perhaps the phraseology of Room for the River is put into slightly different words. But yeah, hopefully we have it well embedded. Councillor Scott.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just need to say this while you're at the table, and to you also, Catherine. I think significant piece of work here that's done. I won't be picking any holes in it whatsoever. But when I joined talking about our rivers and stuff in 2008, developing Canterbury water management strategy, we viewed our rivers differently then. We viewed them as flood channels. And I think that what this has done, finally, it's got we've got a document that's been pretty well researched and consulted on, and that lifts those rivers into another realm, almost like a holistic approach to, a generic holistic approach to our rivers, which I think is well done. And, you know, I won't hold anyone up any higher, but Catherine, that comes out of your department, and I think, you know, for my time being a part of this, which is almost 17 years now, I think it's a really, really sound document. So thank you. My question. My question is this. There was always going to be a question, but I need to say that when you're at the table. My question is this. So we haven't got a definitive definition of braided rivers in the RMA. And how do you see that affecting this document? Because although it does set out, a view of what braided rivers should be, every now and again we get tested on that. And the definition within the RMA pushes us back. And Dewhurst is a classic example of that. So is there an answer that you have?
I'll answer that in two ways. So first, when it comes to the RMA definition, those conversations are still ongoing. So as you'll all be aware, as part of the NBEA process, we submitted on the issues around defining riverbeds in relation to braided rivers. And as a result of that, there was a change in the definition that did incorporate braided rivers and a pathway to defining those. While the NBEA was repealed, those conversations are still ongoing. So there's a number of conversations happening. Staff are talking to MFE about how we're delineating braided rivers, and the genesis of that is from the work that happened on the RMA definition. And I think secondly, when we're thinking about the definition of rivers in the context of this strategy, I don't actually see the RMA definition as relevant at all. So we know that there's issues around defining our rivers as an active channel in accordance with the RMA. This is about our work in and with rivers generally. We work in the active riverbed, we work adjacent to rivers, and if we're considering them holistically, we need to be considering a river as more than just its active channel and considering our work as it relates to rivers across the board.
Councillor Mackay.
Thank you very much. I note that in the paper that's been written, we refer constantly, and I'm very pleased to see it, around Canterbury Regional Council. But in the document itself, in the draft, we do reference Environment Canterbury. I'm just wondering, it'd be nice if we could be consistent and perhaps put Canterbury Regional Council in the draft. Is that possible, staff?
If that's council's suggestion, then yes, it's very possible.
Okay, Chair Pauling.
Kia ora, Vicky. Thanks, team. Look, just acknowledging first, awesome to finally see this here. It's awesome to, I know we've been working on it for a while, so I acknowledge all the work that's gone into it. Do acknowledge the point that has been made earlier about the Papatipi Runanga and that Toropu Tuia engagement. I would value that. I think it's really important, even though there's been lots of back and forth and involvement and lots of other work. I think we still have to get this in front of them, so I'd support that. And if that means we have an updated staff resolution at number 3, that would be really good. Maybe we can look at that as we go through. And I do have a question, sorry. Just a couple of things. One thing that I've really picked up is I've looked at page 7 where we've got the map, which I love maps, so thank you. But when I see the heading significant rivers, I just sort of sent a little thing through my body because I'm like, well, lots of people have other rivers that might not be listed and they'll think my river's significant too. Why is it not there? But I get it that it's a braided river strategy. What I'm thinking, and linked to Councillor Scott's question, I got a question about should we actually put our definition of braided river in this document? I think that's important so that then we can go, hence why these rivers are only listed here. So actually define it better and then acknowledge that, yes, we have other rivers too in our region. They're just not covered by this strategy because this is about braided rivers. In a nutshell, I think that would be really helpful in this document because then it clarifies why those 13 rivers listed and not others. And that's a way to also get our definition that we really would like to see in the RMA or whatever it becomes out there. So that's just one thing. So that's sort of a question, but sort of a statement. Sorry. And I did have one other point, and that was about on page 72 of the thing, but 18 of the strategy. Under biosecurity and biodiversity, should we also mention the pest management plan work that's going to come into the future and make sure that's linked in here somewhere too, because that's under review in a year or so's time. So just didn't want to get that missed off, that's going to be quite critical linking back into this work. So would that be good?
If that's your recommendation, yes, we can definitely add. I mean, we've got the more generic managing weed and animal pests, but if you want a specific reference to the regional pest management plan, you can add that.
Definition of braided rivers. Do you think that's something we could do?
I'll defer to Sarah here because she's had a lot of conversations with the MFE and is a resident expert on that area.
I think defining braided rivers, there's still challenges around that in terms of writing down a firm definition of what we think they are. For this strategy, it is a braided river strategy, but we're calling it a rivers strategy and incorporating all rivers in that. I guess if we're thinking about the holistic Kioskitai approach, we've got braided rivers with braided reaches and some non-braided reaches. We've got tributaries and streams, watercourses feeding into those. So I don't want to exclude the wider river styles and the wider catchment from the strategy itself. But we can look into whether we actually define what we consider braided rivers to be, bearing in mind we need it to be the catchment.
Thank you. I think it'd just be really helpful in our strategy to, whatever we come up with, but we need some framework in there about why we've included these 13 and not others. But like you're saying, there might be stretches of other rivers that become important in time, but there needs to be something in this document that gives that comfort. At the moment, I don't think that's there, so I really agree that let's put something in there. And I get the politics of the other discussion and, the technicalities of the other discussion, but I think it is important that we need to know what we're talking about when we've done a strategy about it. So I do think we should just have a little look at that and see what we could put down. That's my recommendation, but hey, leave it to you guys to have a look at it. Thank you.
Just asking you a question, Craig, on that. I'm just wondering whether if it were framed in the context of this is sort of where we think the sort of definition that we think is a braided river, it aligns with sort of academic or aligns with the sort of general concept of what a braided river is, but we acknowledge that there's some current uncertainty around sort of like the strict legal definition, something like that. So you're acknowledging the progress in that direction, but also that there's some uncertainty. And that might be easier for staff then to, anyway, just a suggestion there. Councillor Swiggs.
Kia ora, awesome piece of work. I think it's been really well done. So again, I'll just echo some of the comments that have been made. And the para framework in there, having that's quite good. It sets a good tone about moving forward and risk and other issues there. But the one issue, and this is from one of our other colleagues, and I agree with him, is the nature of the changing land use around urbanisation and semi-urbanisation of some of the areas that these rivers touch on. Is there any reason why that specifically hasn't been mentioned within the strategy?
I guess, and it's same for some of the other things that have been raised when we were drafting it, trying to keep that balance between keeping a right amount of level in terms of being an overarching strategy, but also providing enough information that you could really see what we're intending to do and the direction we're taking. In terms of that, the reason there isn't anything explicit about, say, what would be a sort of a risk-based approach to asset management, it's because it's implicit in the 30-year infrastructure. So that sort of detail sits somewhere else and is informed by the direction the strategy is taking. So I think that's what you're describing, isn't it? You're looking at, the tension between we build here and there's rivers here, and how do we manage that within our roles and responsibilities. And those roles and responsibilities in terms of flood protection set out in our 30-year infrastructure strategy, and then our asset management plans that then looks at certain assumptions about ongoing risk.
So you're talking about, you said it's implicit, but is there any reason why we can't explicitly just mention the issue around somewhere, and I think that it's around the need for whole of river approach section could just have a tagline in there just saying the risk around the semi-increasing urbanisation in some areas. I don't know, but I kind of want to move it potentially away from the implicit that can kind of get lost depending on translation to far more, a little bit more explicit in terms of that as a huge risk that we face in the challenges of changing land use, especially in potential RMA changes that are going to come through, which will actually make this even more of a risk for us in terms of managing those, especially with some of the other cases that are happening around the country in terms of the Bay of Plenty and the risk to those urban environments in the court case that's going through with the insurers at the moment. So I'm kind of signalling that I'm not sure implicit is going to cut the mustard. I think it does need to be slightly more explicit, but I'll take your guidance on that.
Again, if that's a direction we can certainly look at including that.
I've got Councillor East.
Thank you. Firstly, like a number of others, I'd like to acknowledge the significant amount of work that's gone into this document. I have 4 little points I'd like to raise. Firstly, just referring to item 14 or point 14 on page 51, where we talk about the vision of revival, and we've got 3 bullet points there. The first one is of interest to me: people and property are protected and adaptive. I'd just like to perhaps speak a little on behalf of Councillor Mackenzie regarding that particular item, where he had asked that a comment on the changing nature of development in some of our catchments, such as the Ashley, South Canterbury and Selwyn districts, where semi-urbanisation has taken over as a significant land use change. Our strategy needs to reflect on these changes and the high level of protection that these asset owners expect. And perhaps if we look at page 68, where we're talking about people and property are protected and adaptive, if it was possible, Councillor Mackenzie's comments may fit into a short little narrative in that section. Secondly, previous speakers have talked of consistency of terminology, where we refer to our rivers in an English version and a Maori version, the Regional Council, and Canterbury Waitaha. I note on page 60 that we talk about Canterbury Waitaha in the opening address, and then we refer to just Waitaha going forward. Thirdly, I do have some concern regarding RMA reforms being currently considered, and if changes are made to the Resource Management Act, what is the process to reflect these in the strategy? An example of government's intention is to repeal the use of Te Mana o Te Wai, and yet it is included in our document now. So should that change come about, do we have an addendum or a note somewhere that actually says that potential changes to the RMA may impact on some of our references in the document? And lastly, on page 70, where we're talking about Rangatiratanga and Mahinga Kai, without upsetting my learned colleague across the table. I would sort of question really, what is the extent of mahanga kai that is actually practiced, and some quantification of the potential areas of some significance and the numbers of people that are actually practicing mahanga kai, I feel would be an advantage going forward. So that's my comments to the document, but again, congratulations on a fairly comprehensive piece of work, and hopefully some of those comments can be acknowledged. Thank you.
Okay. I've got Councillor Edge.
Thanks, Chair. I'll just stick to a question, but I have lots of comments to make in the discussion process. Something that I noted in the document that you've written, and it's pretty good. I've got some concerns, but we've previously highlighted a Braided River revival plan that we've been showing our communities for a long time, but it's not part of this document, unfortunately. We've also had a document which describes the interconnectedness between a whole lot of issues that we do, and that's not, it's an easily readable thing in terms of the idea of holistic and integrated planning. And the other thing, these are sort of to do with rivers as well, river management. And the other one is the evolution of flood risk management and how the Braided River revival strategy might affect that, in the future. It talks 250 to 500 years, but I think we've moved on from that. So it's really just, is there any reason why we haven't particularly included that document as a visual representation of the words that have been written?
Thank you. That's a very good point. We are currently trying to source the original of that document so that we can update it. The Braided River Revival one that you just showed it. I also think that it's a very useful document or a very useful portrayal of the issues and the content. And I think we would be open, if that's your direction, to adding an updated version of that, but I think that one is a bit outdated. And the others, I acknowledge the others, that blue diagram is very much a working in-house. I think it's relevant and relatable to staff, but I'm not sure that it would quite fit the rest of the document. But thank you.
Okay. And then Councillor Robinson.
Oh, no, thank you for your consideration in this. It's I too have some concerns. I guess my questions, well, plural. Considering there is an increasing desire or need for water as a resource in the region for the community, industry, recreation, the likes, and considering we currently have a freshwater claim brought to court by Ngāi Tahu, of which I totally support. We also have water conservation order rivers in our takiwa. There's a lot of expectations of our braided rivers and other rivers in our region, and it concerns me that I guess the expectations of some of the elements in the Canterbury water management strategy and the projects looking into the future are not considered in some of this, well, that I can see. And I guess we're looking at positives of how to influence this document, but we're not looking really holistically at the negatives. And that concerns me because, it's not a full picture of what the region expects of our water. So I'm just wondering, if it has been considered, where do I see it, and what considerations have you put into the interception of this document in relation to the Canterbury Water Management Strategy future projects?
So in terms, I could probably answer that in a couple of different ways. I think, have we given consideration to water quality and water quality in terms of the river, thinking about rivers? And I think that's what you're talking about when you're talking about the CWMS. You're talking about increases in irrigation and the use and extraction of water. Right. We've actually put, and this is something that has been quite a topic of discussion about how it's not lost on us that we're talking about Kiuta Kitai and reviving the Māori of rivers, and yet this strategy doesn't cover water quality and water quantity. We would still be waiting for a strategy if it did. Those are very complex and contested issues that are subject to both national direction and then our interpretation or our policy relating to that in a regional context through our integrated planning framework. And so we've specifically, and I totally understand the conundrum, but we've specifically said that this strategy does not speak to that because there is because of the complexity of them and how they are part of that national and then regional framework.
And that concerns me because we're still progressing with different aspects of the strategy for that water management, but we don't really holistically know what values we could be meddling with within some of these major rivers, and that concerns me. So I would expect, I can't support it as it is, and I think it's such a great concept, but we've missed some vital element to this. And I look forward to I've been taken off of it, no? Yeah, I look forward to development of something further, but as it stands, I can't support it, I'm afraid, and I hate to say that.
Okay, so Catherine, you wanted to say something before staff leave the table?
Yeah, no. I think that was the end of the clarification question, so staff are going to leave the table. I just wanted to acknowledge and thank councils for the acknowledgement of the hard work that's been done around this over quite a number of years. And I just wanted to note, and you probably know this, has been the leadership from Lee out of the Operations and Rivers team, and Sarah Withington's here, and she's been working with the team, and the leadership from Jessie out of the Strategy and Planning team. So it's been a real cross-organisational effort to get it here, and I just wanted to thank councillors for the acknowledgement of that work.
Thank you. So, kia ora. So, staff, you're welcome to leave the table, and then we'll move into discussion. Okay. So, just bring up the resolutions. So I've got Chair Pauling moving and Councillor Scott seconding.
Ask a question, Chair.
Certainly.
With Resolution 3, are we, the staff, willing to update that resolution? Could we maybe just take a break while that gets done? So I'm happy to move it with that amendment.
Yeah, we've got two possible dates suggested at the moment. So yeah, we'll just pause for a moment if we go on adjourn for a moment. Okay, kia ora koutou. So we've got a staff amendment to point recommendation 3 that just puts a later date to allow time to engage with mana whanua and the runanga. So I've got a mover and a seconder. So we'll open up for discussion.
Peter, are you
Peter?
Are you happy with the? Yeah.
Okay, so we've got support for both mover and seconder. Those are the recommendations. So open for discussion. So Councillor Chair Pauling, mover.
Kia ora, Vicky. As acknowledged before, thank you so much for the team and all the work that's gone into us over the years. And it's a real balancing act, isn't it, of trying to get detail in there, but keeping it broad enough so we can move forward with the work we have to do. I think the feedback that has been received across the table is really good, and I think staff will go away and reflect on that, and now with a little bit more time and that engagement process, potentially through Tropituia, will help with that as well. I think there's been some really good points made about, and Councillor East made some points from Councillor Mackenzie, just getting a bit of narrative in there. I think that is actually important. Also about the context of the RMA, maybe it is important to have a note in there about the RMA, water conservation orders, and planning and stuff that's all going to carry on, and other strategies that we have, just to make a link to them. I think that is important, and the fact that we're not doing water quality and quantity because they're dealt with in those statutory documents more fully, I think is important just to note again. So the little noting points throughout, as well as the other things that are brought up about defining our braided rivers a bit more and other rivers, so that people are clear about why these ones are there. And yeah, I think there's some really, really awesome outcomes in here. I did note too the power framework that has been mentioned, which was brought up in relation to Room for Rivers. That's really good, but I also aren't clear exactly what we mean by the power framework, because I've Googled it and there's multiple ideas about what that is. So it'd be good if we have a footnote or something in there that just says, when we talk about the power framework, we mean this one, or this document we're referring to, whether it's an MFE document or something. I think that would be helpful, again, just to give us clarity that we don't mean, because there's another power framework that's not anything to do with rivers or resilience, it's something else. So just be really good. But yeah, look, really commend this to our councillors. I think there's been some really good feedback, and looking forward to us being able to have this framework that allows us to carry on the good work we're trying to do and the aspirations for the whole of catchment approach. So thank you, staff.
Thank you. So, Councillor Scott, do you want to wait to the end? Yep. Councillor Korako.
Yeah, kia ora. I just have a question. Are we also awaiting other formal engagements with other parties, or is it just Te Rōpūtuia?
Yes, I think the other engagements we have completed as part of the development process, so I'm not expecting other further engagements. I'm looking at my team over there. No.
So why don't we say that here? That we're actually waiting on a formal engagement with Te Rōpūtuia. Yeah.
Well, I think that's been raised in the debate or in the discussion. So we could add that as a note again, like we did in the previous resolution. So there's a note. Just suggestion, Chair, we could add that as a note at the end that we intend to take this to Rōpūtuia at the next meet, like 21st of March. Yeah. So that is clear. Yep.
Yeah. And I'm hearing that we've been given a heads up that that's doable. So the 21st of March, that will come through. Yeah.
Okay. It's just that and I've also mentioned the fact is that the great work that's been done to put this document together, but how we actually missed the part where we engage with our partner, Papatupa Runanga, because we mention it all the way through, and it's just not the fact that we're talking to our ringawera, our ones that work inside the Bruno. We need to be talking to actually mana to mana with the chairs, because this is a major document, and so that's why I think it's really important that we actually acknowledge what you're doing. That we are actually having a formal presentation to Papatupa Runanga. Okay.
Councillor Cranwell, you're online.
Kia ora tātou. Yeah, just carrying on from Councillor Korako, if we want to be a Te Tiriti partner of excellence, when I read the document, love the document, love the whakapapa in behind it, actually talking about mana o te wai, how we ended up where we are, and, talking about the regional policy statement and some of the work we've done, but it didn't, to the knuckle of it, we didn't really, encapsulate actually working in partnership. So therefore, by going to Turuputuia and having that process in place now, and then coming back before or after for the 28th of May, I think that's a reasonable step to take. So really looking forward to how Runanga feedback on this from the chairs and kind of at the next Turuputuia really kind of getting into this. So thanks once again to staff. And really looking forward to the Runaka feedback, as I believe it'll be positive. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Councillor Burns.
Kia ora, Chair. I too would like to thank the staff involved with this. It's a really good document. Sadly, though, for many people in Canterbury, the focus on these rivers usually is around the quality and quantity of fresh water and the associated activities. He tangata o Te Tiriti Ahau allows me to be able to practice mahinga kai, which I do regularly on our wonderful rivers. I would just say I agree with Councillor Mackay in regards to the Canterbury Regional Council. Canterbury Regional Council has for some time recognised the value of the Braided rivers as taonga for everyone in Canterbury, the environment, etc., especially through the very quick uptake of the opportunity through the change in the Local Government Act to create regional parks on their rivers, or on the rivers that they are vested with controlling. I'm going to support it, and I just want to say thank you. It's really good. Certainly over the last 20 years, I think the work that the Canterbury Regional Council has been carrying out, especially under the guidance, I think Lee was, Ross Vesey, I think, was the head strang in those days, but certainly Lee and her team have taken that on really well. So I just want to acknowledge everyone involved with this part of it, and also Lee and her team. Kia ora.
Cool. Thank you. Councillor Edge.
Thanks, Chair. And yes, I want to thank the team for putting this together as well. I do have some comments, and hopefully they're aimed at being constructive. Just a couple of good points, really, just before I start any other matters. Page 72, I really like the idea of increasing funding for the whole of catchment works, a wider extent than the traditional flood protection scheme areas. So, possibly some more funding for that. Increasing nature-based solutions and preparing for climate change adaptation as part of that process. In terms of page 73, the bullet point there, developing an integrated planning framework and increasing compliance with relevant regulations. I think that's really good. Page 71, a key thing for me, facilitating landscape scale alignment across agencies and community groups ensures Braided River work is coordinated, efficient, and makes the most of collective resources. And the other thing too there is that developing an intergenerational strategy to leverage opportunities for our land and achieve Council's long-term aspirations and strategic priorities. I think they're pretty good. My main concern is about the narrative on page 6, which to me, and I raised the idea of where is the concept plan that we've all been looking at in the last certainly last 5 years or more. There doesn't seem to be a reference to a vision document, and I think that's highly important. And also, I'm there's no real reference to what spatial context means of Karakia, the corridor. What does that actually mean? Braided River revival is not just about looking at the main stem. It's looking at the tributaries, the landscape, the broader landscape, the terraces that have been created, and all those sorts of things. In terms of definition, I am sure that most geomorphologists know what the definition of a braided river is and the components and attributes of those braided rivers. And I think that would be important to ensure that it is an internationally recognised landscape feature, and there are descriptions about what that means, the patterns, the myriad of patterns, the way the water flows, those sorts of things. I was unclear about how an assessment of the corridor and the components of those corridors. There's no real reference to the multi-resource analysis of what goes on through that corridor. And I'm thinking here that undertaking that process actually helps to inform natural resource management, and this is what we're talking about is the management. So that then delivers a fully integrated approach. A key thing for me too is there's no mention of the outstanding natural landscapes and features and attributes of our braided rivers. And I refer to a couple of documents, one of them being Appendix 4 of our current RPS, which describes the outstanding natural features and landscapes at a regional scale. And in that, the descriptions, for example, of the Upper Rakaya Valley, they describe the legibility, what are the characteristics, the river terraces, the large tributary fans, the extensive braided patterning and all those, so expressive of the dynamic, legible landscape feature. So those things really need to be in the narrative. And it's not just about flooding and protection and stuff like that. It is those other things that contribute to that. So it's just missing. The regional parks, the corridor connections, the recreation amenity values, the tourism, the economy, those sort of things come into it as well. So in terms of the holistic and integrated up the corridor, what are the land ownership issues up there? And how are we going to work with a myriad of landscape tenure, both in private and public sector, to achieve the goals? I'm a wee bit concerned that we really haven't had this sort of comprehensive evaluation of the spatial context of that braided rivers, and it would be good to example maybe a conceptual way a little bit more. But there is a risk at the moment in terms of some of the wording in the document that we could end up having ad hoc budgetary decisions without of isolated interventions along the river without understanding the broader context of what's going on. So it does talk about landscape scale, but it also doesn't quite deliver on that either. In terms of the discussion that some people had about...
Point of order. This has gone on for 5 minutes and 20 now, and we have a standing order 20.2, which limits people speaking to 5 minutes.
Okay, I hadn't been timing, sorry.
Just one thing to say.
Can we just... Yeah, I've gone. Can you finish your point? Yeah, thank you.
I finished my point. I just one more point related to the urban growth issue. The other document that we have that considers that is the landscape chapter 12 of the current RPS, where it talks about the protection of outstanding features and landscapes, and it talks about the RMA Section 6 responsibilities, so that there are some mechanisms there. But what I'd like to see, Chair, if at all possible, is to be able to give some written feedback to the team of some of these thoughts that I have and some other thoughts that I think would help improve the document, and we have some more time for that as well.
I think there's that would be fine. Capture that on there. I think it is. I mean, it broadly was hopefully nearly there. But we obviously do have some time now with Mana Whanua also taking another look. I would note that, I mean, to me, that we do have the Braided River Revival place-based strategy. So my sense is that a lot of what you're talking about actually would be captured through that. Although for me, I have noted that we don't have a list. We've only got 2 rivers mentioned in that, the Braided River Revival list. And then, of course, we've got many more, including the ones that we've identified as the sort of like the big significant ones. And so I would love to know that we're, as an organisation, looking at what are the ones that come after the 2 that we've already identified in that list and how we're going to prioritise them. So that would be an action that I would like to know more about. But absolutely, send some things through. But bearing in mind, I think a lot of the detail you're talking about is captured in the things that this refers to. So can I then go? We've got 2 minutes until. Well, we can extend. It's no problem. I've got. Hang on a minute. Let me see. I have Councillor Mackay wanted to speak. I think we better. We'll look at. We're 29 past. We'll extend. It takes seconds to do the extension. So
I'll move to extend.
Okay. So Pauling and Burns on for the extension. Everyone in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? No, that's carried. So right. So Councillor Mackay.
Thank you very much. I will be very brief and just draw people's attention. I will thank staff. I think this is a great document. But I just want to remind councillors that this is to guide and align the council's approach to working in and with the rivers in Waitaha, Canterbury. And it is centred on a whole of river approach, and there's multiple values in there, as we know, but certainly around the revival of braided rivers in Karakia. So, look, I'm really, really supportive of it. Just want to get it on the table. Certainly, the infrastructure, 30-year infrastructure plan, and that is the underpinning document for me. And I do note, and I possibly agree with Councillor East, and I think Councillor Swiggs was also suggesting some comment around the urbanisation and the flood protection mechanisms. So perhaps it could be added to the forward. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else before I move to the seconder and the? I will just for my own point. I do totally get concerns that you have, Councillor Robinson. Like, the quality and quantity is so fundamental to the outcomes of these rivers, and you sort of feels a bit strange in a way to say we're going to park that bit and we're going to put this together. But I think the fact that the quantity and the quality issues are so enormous that we need to resolve. This has got a lot of that forward thinking. It's 100-year strategy, and we know that the other work is going to be taking place, and we're moving forward.
No, thanks for acknowledging that, Chair, the chairperson. Yeah, I agree. And although the date, 28th of May, I think it's great we can have some chats between now and then. I still am cautious about, I guess, the opportunity for other matters to progress where, water's still been abstracted in a way that we can't quantify in this document. So, yeah, thank you for acknowledging that. Cheers.
Okay. So, anyone else before I move to Councillor Scott? Do you want to?
Yeah, listen, I totally disagree with making any changes. I don't think that's what we should be doing with this document. This is a good document. It's a strategy. It's a 100-year view of the rivers, and a strategic approach relates to the most important general aspects of those rivers. So it's that view of the rivers. When councillors are talking about putting specific personal requirements in a document like this, it does not reflect this council's view. And so I'm not wanting you to speak at all, councillor. This is my opportunity as the seconder of this to say the things that I need to say. So that's my view of this. This document has gone through a couple of councils and is a good document. At this last minute, people suggesting that we should make changes to it because of their personal views is not warranted. And so I'm happy to support this, Chair.
Point of order, Chair. Can I just respond to that, please? The personal orders are not my personal orders. They are in Appendix 4 of the RPS. They are in Chapter 12 of the RPS. They are there, and there are some missing things in this document. And I'm talking about the narrative, and making sure that there is a cross narrative between existing documents that we have and we operate under, and this document. It is a very good structurally, but there's just some things missing.
So just for my part, just to say, I think that this is a good conversation. We've had a conversation. There are some things that have been highlighted, which I think if staff feel that there's a sense in incorporating this in, I don't have a problem with that. I think staff can put that. We have now coming through Te Rōpituia. And so if we're actually engaging with Te Rōpituia, we have to acknowledge that there may well be changes that are proposed through that process. And it will then ultimately come back to council. But I think if staff can take away what they've heard today, consider that, see where it fits in. The process of this is to make it a better document. I acknowledge that, and staff are across where, the politics might lie. So hopefully then they can take this into account.
Point of order from my perspective as a seconder to this, I don't think what you've just said reflects what we are going to hear. So I don't know whether that's reflected. Point 2 there delegates the chief executive the ability to correct any minor errors, but it doesn't say anything about substantive changes. Now, the points that Councillor Edge has just made in response to what I said are substantive.
Yeah, and I can take your point on that one, at which point I almost am wondering if at this stage we should be removing recommendations 1 and 2 and we go to recommendation 3, because we can't genuinely take this to Te Rōpituia without acknowledging that we might need to be making changes. And so actually 1 and 2, Chair Pauling, do you want to?
First of all, just a note on points of order. When you do a point of order, like Councillor Mackay did, you meant to note the standing order that it relates to. So thanks, Councillor Mackay, but other people are just randomly doing it, and which makes it really hard on the chair to rule on that, just so you know. But on the point, look, I don't agree, because I think it says a draft Braided River Revival strategy. That's what we're doing today. We're not approving the strategy. We're recommending that it goes forward. The bit about the chief executive, well, that's so the staff can make changes, yes, of minor amendment at the moment. But as we've discussed, I think that, and the chair has said, the staff have heard some things today that they'll reflect on. That's their role, and they will do that. And it is going to go through to Te Rōpituia now, as will be noted in a secretarial note. And that is going to, potentially create some change. But like we've heard from our 2 Ngāi Tahu councillors, they believe that there's going to be some good support for this through that process. So I'm not worried about that. So I'm happy for them to stay as it is. We've already put them, we've got a mover and second, we've had a debate, we've got to put it to the vote at some point. So I'm happy with that. And I just think that, the staff have heard some things. Ultimately, it's got to be approved by this council. So staff will be mindful of that as they go away and do that little bit more work, that it needs to, if we want it to succeed and get through, it has to get agreement across our table. So that's a normal part of our council process. But I think it's been a really good discussion. This has been our first chance to look at it as a comprehensive document. We've had workshops, we've had lots of things, we've seen lots of slides, but we've never seen it together in one place. This has been our first chance to do this. So I think it's been a good discussion, and I'm looking forward to the next steps, because I think we all around this table want to see it succeed. So I, again, compel our council to move the resolution so we can move forward. So, kia ora.
Okay. So, Councillor Scott, do you want to stay as the seconder on this? On that second, you don't.
Well said, Chair. No, I don't. It doesn't substantially support my view on this, so I would prefer not to have my name on it.
Okay. Councillor Burns, I think, marginally pipped you to the post. Councillor Sungle. Okay, so amicably have agreed that Councillor Burns will second this one. So at this point, then can we have all those who are in favour please say aye? Aye. And those who are against?
Well, we're just listing it on a...
Oh, sorry, Councillor Cranwell, I missed that.
Oh, that was an aye.
An aye. Okay. And Councillor Deitchen Davies, I'm going to assume you're an aye, unless you say otherwise.
Correct. Aye.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Scott's an abstention. Yeah. So can we note that, please? Oh, it's noted. Great. Lovely. Okay, so that's passed. And we've got a process there from Te Rōpūturi and so on. So thank you. Okay, so should we break now? A good point to break. Kia ora. Kia ora koutou, kia ora, councillors online. So we're just about to restart again. So thanks for your patience. So I think we're pretty much all back. I think we're all back at the table. Councillor Cranwell's not currently online, but we'll note when he comes back in. And so I think we'll get started. So it's 1:12. And we're jumping into report items for information now. Item 9.1, which is the Strategy and Policy Committee Resolution Status Report. And so we have Catherine speaking to that one.
Thank you, Chair. The resolution status report is there for your information, and I note that most of it is green. There's some amber and a little bit of commentary about when that's coming back to the various committees, and that's around the dust literature review. Take any questions.
So any questions, councillors, on the resolution status report? Doesn't look like it. Okay, so can we have the resolution up on the screen, please? Recommendation. So Councillor Burns will move that one. Got a second of Councillor Ward to second. Okay, so all those who are in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? No, so that's carried, thank you. Okay, so moving on to item 9.2. So this is the update on the revitalisation of Canterbury Biodiversity Strategy. And we should have Alex online. Hopefully just arrived and in the lobby. Here we are. Welcome, Alex. You're bang on time. We've just got to this part of the paper. And so I understand that you're going to be talking to the biodiversity strategy revitalisation. So I'll hand it across to you. Here we go. We can see you. Beautiful location.
For the councillors, yes. Today I'm at the top of the Milford track. So
Now we've got an issue. The sound isn't very strong, so can't.
Does this work? Sometimes.
Yep, that's better. Thank you.
Is that better for you all? Okay. Oh,
Yep.
sorry. I'll have to just look a bit
Hold
strange.
it.
So
That's okay.
talk.
No, I'd
worries.
rather hear you and have you looking strange than not hear you. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Okay. I will largely take this paper as read, as it substantively provides a sort of progress update on the work that we've done to date to revitalise the Canterbury Biodiversity Strategy. If you remember at previous meetings of this committee or previous iterations, you've nominated Councillors Robinson and Karakia to help support staff directly through this process and sort of represent council's interests as we move through the revitalisation. I'm pleased to say that it's a process that's now well underway. We've attached a timeframe there for your interest and information that sort of describes the key engagement milestones that we've got scheduled or in place. And then we've also had a bit of a summary in that paper of the key milestones since we last reported back to you. And in summary, we've been able to work with your nominated councillors to bring them up to speed on the process, provide a bit of early briefing opportunity for them, get some questions for them and provide some clarity over the engagement process that we're running. We've got a fantastic service provider on board to support us in delivering this strategy by helping us to facilitate workshops at the moment across two streams. So there's a Runanga engagement, mana whenua engagement stream and a broader collaborative workshopping component to this work program. And that group is Whakamaska was helping us do that, and I'll just sort of say thank you to them for coming on board and supporting us. The key element of their support enables us to sort of participate alongside everybody else as a council in this revitalisation stage, this collaborative process. We had the first of our engagement workshops with Runanga late last month, towards the end of February, and we had really good attendance from a whole host of the different Runanga in there, and as a result of that, we've sort of got a tentative view on how that engagement might occur on an ongoing basis. And at the moment, it looks to be that the Runanga, with the idea that we've put back to all of the Runanga as a result of that hui, has been that they'll be considering the opportunity to provide some sort of co-authorship to support our project team, which is a really exciting development. But we just have to let that process run its course, allow the Runanga themselves to consider their options there for ongoing engagement, and whatever the case is, whatever the engagement approach we end up following, they'll be supporting the revitalisation through those means. Later this month, we have the first of our broader collaborative workshops scheduled, so we're bringing together a whole host of different individuals and organisations. We cast the net really quite wide to try and capture everybody that we could to invite to that. So that will be held at our offices on, I believe, Tuesday the 17th or 18th of March, Tuesday the 18th of March. We've got obviously your nominated councillors ready to attend that to provide this council's perspective into the process, and my poor inbox is getting absolutely slammed with a whole host of different accepts and forwards and all sorts of other things that are happening as a result of that. So we'll be bringing that that conversation together to sort of talk about the collective vision for biodiversity across Canterbury, and that's an exciting milestone because that begins the sort of phase of actually actively revitalising, updating where required, and bringing that biodiversity strategy back into the contemporary and relevance for the current sort of state of biodiversity across the region and the people's aspirations for biodiversity. We've got a pretty optimistic timeframe to put this back to councillors by September for decisions, so I'm pretty confident that we can do that, but we're being really conscious to strike the balance of that optimistic timeframe for a piece of work that we know is very critical to this council against the need to do genuine engagement and partnership and co-authorship if that's required along the way. So I'm optimistic for that timeframe, but again, it's striking a bit of a balance between two critical processes: what's important to this council and what's important for the others that are involved. So. With that in mind, I'll pause and open it to any questions you might have about the paper or the process.
Councillor Korako.
Oh, kia ora, Alex. Hey, thank you for the update, and the consensus that I've heard actually amongst the Papatipu is that they're very appreciative of the the closer collaboration with us, and particularly possible co-writing. And so it's been noted because this is really a top priority with them about this whole strategy. So thanks so much for your work, and also I'm hearing really good positive things about what you guys are doing. So kia ora. Thank you.
Do I have any other questions from councillors? Councillor Robinson.
No, thanks for this. Just wondering when other parties were, I guess, a part of this whole discussion and this new setting, the revitalisation, because we're, workshops coming up. I'm just wondering who has been engaged with and at what stage that's at. So whether or not they've had opportunity to gather their thoughts on it.
It'll be, to answer that question, a bit of a mixed bag. So some of the people that are going to be involved have worked with the strategy in its current form or were involved in the original development of it, they or their organisations. Those representatives will probably be a bit more attuned to what the strategy is saying, and maybe a bit better prepared to talk about how it's worked for them. We also were quite deliberate at the engagement session we held last year to canvass the room about what voices might be missing or what voices might have emerged from within our communities since the 2008 strategy adoption. So we've cast the net wide to try and capture a broad range of those community interests, including trying to sort of find representatives from organisations that support community catchment groups, from some of the newer biodiversity-focused groups that have emerged since 2008, as well as the sort of primary sector interests and the others, and that have a a strong interest in biodiversity at place and on the land. So they will be mixed levels of experience and understanding of the biodiversity strategy within the group that's coming. But again, we're trying to facilitate a workshop that enables participation from across those views. The other thing that's happening is that the facilitating the person that's going to be managing the workshop in a facilitative capacity has actually been reaching out to some of the individuals and organisations in advance of that workshop to sort of test the temperature, to dip our toes in the waters about those different views, and is using a sort of subset of early interviews to inform the workshop content.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, do you have any other questions? Councillor Chair Pauling.
Kia ora, Alex. Hey, thanks for the work that's going on and getting this moving forward. It's really good to see. And yeah, great to know that we've got the capacity there to push it on. Noting that we have the timeframes changing a little bit. Just a question around. I know we had a Biodiversity Champions meeting late last year, and we talked about a steering group. Is there any? Can you tell us what's happening with that group?
It's in a bit of a murky space at the moment. So obviously you've nominated the two councillors I mentioned previously to sit in your capacity there, and we put that question to the TAs and especially as part of that meeting, and didn't get a whole heap of immediate buy-in for that. In the interim, between the time when I wrote that paper and now, I've had some feedback from, I believe, Ashburton District Council. I'd have to fact check myself on that, but at least one set of those councillors has gone away and thought about how they might want to be represented and taken it upon themselves to nominate some councillors to support that group. And then it will be a matter of live conversation that we need to pull up with the Runanga now that we've begun that engagement process. So I was in a bit of a holding pattern with that, not quite sure how to proceed, and I think I got a bit of a step forward now. It just might come online a touch later than some of the collaborative workshops, given the delays that we've had in getting representation to there. In the interim, I've been sort of trying to make time with Councillors Robinson and Kotoko and our, I think we indicated senior leader from Environment Canterbury, to at least keep that level of steering oversight live. So we've had an initial meeting there, and we'll be scheduling more meetings around bookending each of the collaborative workshop sessions that we've got to maintain sort of progress and momentum.
Because my recollection of the meeting was that Celeste was put forward as an option, myself, and then Nikki maybe from Waimakariri, as well as Nigel Bowen maybe as ex officio because he's the chair of the Mayoral Forum with that sit on. So I just think it's important to acknowledge that and try to figure that in. I thought it'd be good if we could acknowledge that some way in the next update, or because we don't have a reflection of the Mayoral Forum linked to here and the Biodiversity Champion work that's going on. So I think that's important. Can I have another question?
Yeah.
But just my other question is, in 9.2.1, like that's an attachment about the engagement process. And then under point 11, that's more of the sort of timeline. And I remember the indicative timeline that we had last year, I think in June, had like arrows and ticks and stuff. It just might be cool to get an update of that document, like that timeline, because I'm mindful of the Mayoral Forum engagement that's going to have to happen at some point, and just how that's been plugged into the program. So that would be important to see that come back. And lastly, I'm just interested in, is there going to be like any like issues and options paper or analysis that's brought forward earlier than an actual strategy? Is that like to inform the next steps? Is that being done?
Okay, so two questions I think there. In the first, I'll do my best to update the sort of structure of that report to be maybe a bit more visually appealing. I was trying to, I guess, document what's been done in that chart that you draw attention to. So if that's not a suitable way to display that information, I can have another go at it as I continue to update this committee or council. Secondly, in relation to the Mail Forum links. I'd probably need a bit of direction from someone higher than the organisation than me, or perhaps yourself as Chair Pauling, to pull an update into that forum. I think it's a pretty important place to, at the very least, be continuing to update the Mail Forum about our progress. And I think the next Mail Forum meeting is on the 30th of May with a 16 May paper deadline. So if that's a bit of directive that needs to happen to put a paper towards that group, I can do that work. I can do that, Mihi, but it's not on me to dream up Mail Forum papers.
Yeah, I think an update in May and or August would be important, just to keep, and it's not hard to do. I mean, I can help work on that, so I'm sure we can work on that with Marie as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Edge?
It's just that question about the issues and options, Alex. Sorry.
Of course. Sorry, I did get distracted in amongst the answers there, others there. So part of the one of the more compelling elements for having the service provider that we selected help with this work is that they included as part of their proposal access to their in-house sort of team of ecologists and experts. So in the background at the moment, as we speak, they are busily working away on all of the supporting and sort of underlying information to support that strategy. At the moment, we see that as being an input into the workshop processes themselves. So a better explanation of what's changed and the current state of biodiversity across Waitaha. So yes, that's happening. I don't know if it's exactly in the way you anticipate that coming to this group, but it's certainly being information that's going to be supporting the collaborative workshop, collaborative strategy design process.
Thank you, Alex. That's great. It's great that it's going to link into the workshops. I think that's great. Thank you.
And Councillor Edge?
Thanks, Alex. You just a question about timelines and reporting to not only ourselves, but August to me, I mean, September's the deadline. Basically, that'll be adopted in September. August seems a bit tight to do any sort of last-minute revisions, if you like, or amendments, edits. Do you have a timeline, or are you able to give us a timeline that recognises that the paper or the draft will come back to Strategy and Policy Committee, the Mayoral Forum timeframes, any timeframes with the TAs, and discussions with the biodiversity champions? But how is that all going to fit in between, say, now and August at the latest?
I admit it's a sort of optimistic timeframe. We were pretty confident that September was the critical date for this council to work towards. So our entire process has been designed backwards to support that. You said it will be adopted by this council in September. I can't guarantee that. I can guarantee that you'll have something in front of you for you to decide whether or not to adopt or what to do with by that time. That's the commitment I have to you. There's a whole host of those other processes. You mentioned the Canterbury Biodiversity Champions, which are the TA representatives with a focus on biodiversity, who have been not necessarily appointed by, but endorsed by the Mail Forum to undertake that role. So they've been briefed on this throughout our meetings, and maybe Chair Pauling could elaborate on that if he wishes, for a very long time now. This work has been in the mix for council for a while, but subject to some unfortunate delays. They all are very well aware of the process that's going on. That group of TA councillors are all invited to the workshopping sessions, as well as their nominated staff representative from each of those TAs. So I think the short answer to the question is that we've made the space with that workshopping and collaborative design process to revitalise this strategy, not completely toss it out and start again necessarily, but to revitalise it, which is a slightly less burdensome requirement on a constrained time frame, but with pretty strict goalposts and structure around what questions we're going to be asking when and opportunities for people to consider. So I think we've designed the engagement process to allow for that diverse array of input and iterate the strategy as we go throughout those workshopping processes. So it will depend, I guess, on the level of input and whatever we get. But I believe if you looked at the attachment to the paper, the last workshop is more about feeding back and review with the broader collaborative group than it is about doing additional strategy design at that time. So again, we're thinking about the phasing of this work so that we can hit that cadence and get to this in front of council by that September date.
Any other questions from other councillors? I have a couple of my own. Councillor Burns?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I've really only got one question. Given the work was set out in the previous trimester, and initially the hold-up was waiting for the National Policy Statement of Indigenous Biodiversity, do you think when that came into effect in August 2023, it might have been a more realistic timeframe to get through the process?
Certainly. I think there was a unfortunate stacking of issues there. Anticipating the delays to the NPS, we actually didn't have budget to do this work at all for a year around that, and that was a significant delaying factor for us. We had to wait until a subsequent annual planning round.
Can I have a follow-up question, please? My follow-up question would have, if you didn't have budget, when it went to the December council meeting after the November Biodiversity Biosecurity meeting, you sat here and said that you didn't require extra budget, which was one of the reasons a number of councillors didn't support that additional funding. I'm just a bit confused on that.
I think the process that we're running now is quite different to the one that I described when I said I didn't need additional budget to progress. We talked about doing the background work to support this revitalisation on a pretty lean budget and time frame at that time. What's been made available to us now is allowed us to accelerate things and do this work. So I can only, I guess, apologise for the delays that have occurred. It's been unfortunate. It's not been the nicest time for all of us involved to sit here in front of you and explain those delays away. But I mean, I'm thrilled to be able to come here now and say that we're absolutely roaring ahead. So I know it's constrained and tight, but yeah.
Thanks, Alex. And no, it's really good to see what we've got now mapped out, and really appreciate the questions. A question of mine which does relate to dates. So acknowledging that there is that risk around how do you do engagement in a genuine way on a tight time frame, what are you putting in place to try to make sure that we don't, for example, have slippage due to just not being able to get enough of the stakeholders together on a particular day, for example? What strategies are you using to try the best to bring as many people to this as you can over the next, 4 or 5 months?
I guess I can't force people to be engaged and interested in this process. I can just, and the project team can just provide the opportunity. I think we've been pretty clear since mid last year with the groups of people, especially with the group that we brought to our initial discovery session, that this process is coming and imminent. We've provided the structured timeline of engagement to all of the people that we talked to there. They should be aware with now several months' notice about the plans that this organisation has to drive the process along. And this, like I said, the space is there for those who want to be involved in this to come in and provide their perspectives to inform it. But it's a big group. It's already a really big group. I can't be in control of everyone's priorities and the expectations to be part of that process. But by casting the net wide, as I talked about before, we hope to capture perspectives, even if there's specific individuals or organisations that are unable to come along. It should still be representative of this community's aspirations and goals for biodiversity.
Okay, thank you. And then another question, which is really sort of asking, just from what we've discussed and the questions that have come through, I'm just wondering whether, because at the moment there was a bit of a question about whether this needs to come through strategy and policy first and then go to council. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me when you look at the September strategy and policy date, which is 10th of September, and the council's the 17th of September. So it doesn't leave much room for any sort of observations or comments that we might have to actually make any change. Whereas your August date for the stakeholder group, I think you're expecting to be really quite near the end of the pulling together the document and the words. Could you have a look at whether bringing that to the 6th of August strategy and policy meeting, so that as a council we get to see it really at the same time as those stakeholders? Could you have a look and see if that might be a way to do it? And that would mean we can put some input to it at the same time, and then it's come through to that 17th of September council. To give that a bit of consideration. So I'll leave that as a...
I could do my absolute level best to make that work, and I hope that aligns. It might be that the last of our meetings with the stakeholder groups is slightly after that S&P meeting, but I'll do my level best to provide that opportunity. In the interim, I'd just remind you again that councillors Kotoko and Robinson are your nominated representatives to support this process on an ongoing basis. So they are a conduit for the wider council to provide input as we develop this strategy. So it's not you're absent an opportunity in any of these development stages. It's just that for efficiency reasons, not all of you are going to get to see it all the time. I'd also just say that as a true collaborative process, what you might want to change at the end of the day would be something that you'd have to take very seriously to sort of make a decision as a council or strategy and policy committee. To do those sorts of changes would just be something I'd...
The reason why I'm raising this right now is because, having just experienced the Braided River strategy that came through this morning, when councillors do get to see something all, in a sort of final draft and it's all come together, you sort of might end up having slightly different things you want to feed into that at that stage than you might have done just through sort of snapshots in briefings and the like. So I'm just recognising this morning and trying to make sure that we have a little bit more time. So I think Catherine will look at that. And sorry, I did realise I had one final question, which was around, it's one of the things that we felt would potentially particularly of benefit of doing this revitalisation. As you point out, it's revitalisation, not a complete rewrite from nothing, was really about rebuilding and reconnecting with all these stakeholders, including new groups. And if you acknowledge there's a bit of a zeitgeist at the moment, more and more groups taking on the idea of biodiversity and its value and what can we do. So have you thought about what comes after this revitalisation? So it was sort of rushing to September to get something over the line, but what are there opportunities thereafter to keep connection? Maybe an annual come together or something to acknowledge the progress that the strategy makes and keeping track of what is it delivering on and so on. Like, have you given some thought to the what after?
I guess, like any good strategy, an implementation plan is going to be required in some way, shape or form. I'm interested to see the conversation that we have as a collaborative group around the actions that are contained in the current strategy and the sort of relative success or uptake of those. I think one of the pitfalls of the existing sort of strategy was that it was very, very challenging to hold the other organisations to account to those actions. So in my mind, we need to look internally at what this organisation might be prepared to commit to, and then build an implementation plan out of that for the actions that might fall on a regional council, and maybe be a bit more deliberate. And then I guess the thinking I've done around how other partners might be able to actively participate in this process and carry it forward, maybe it's less of a specific action focus in future. Maybe they commit to the strategic anchors within the strategy and carry those forward as part of their organisational intent and design their own implementation approaches. But the floor is really open for all of those sorts of views and opportunities for ongoing ways to continue coming together to talk about our shared approach to biodiversity. So I'm happy to sit in that room and support those conversations and hear what the group has to say before we lock anything in. But I mean, yeah, implementation following strategy is definitely something that the project team is thinking about.
Fabulous. Thank you. Councillor Burns again.
Yeah, thank you. Just a bit of a supplementary with the conversation. Do you see, Alex, any issues that might arise given that a number of the TAs have actually developed their own biodiversity strategies in the last sort of 12 months?
Not immediately. I actually think that all of those TAs have been pretty conscious of the fact that there is a regional biodiversity strategy in place. I sat on a steering group for the Selwyn Biodiversity Strategy development and sort of advised them about the regional biodiversity strategy approach. All of the staff that have developed those biodiversity strategies work with us on a regular basis across our biodiversity operational delivery and as part of the sort of collaborative staff hui that we have. I think the key message is about the vertical alignment. So we're looking for ways that we can align our regional strategy with the national biodiversity strategy Te Mana o Te Taio. Similarly, those councils are looking at their local biodiversity issues and opportunities in the context of both the Te Mana o Te Taio and the Canterbury biodiversity strategy. So I think it's fantastic that they're taking ownership of those documents, and I think the perspective that they'll be able to bring to the conversation around the regional strategy will actually be informed much better by those councils that have gone through that process recently. So they'll have more up-to-date information about their parts of the region and what's work and what their communities want to see for biodiversity improvement and a better feel for the actions that they want supported. So I personally only see it as a positive.
Lovely. Thanks, Alex. So no more questions? Anyone? No? Okay, so that's great. Thanks, Alex, for your responses and for your work in this. Kia ora. So can we bring up the recommendations? And we were looking at a slight amendment, weren't we, to the recommendation 2. So you can see on there what staff have suggested to make it more clear that we're endorsing, because there's been a slight change to there is a change to the time frame that we'd originally endorsed, and put in that date about adoption by council in September 2025. So can I have a mover, please? We'll move the preference. So Genevieve, Councillor Robinson, and a seconder. Do we have a hand up for seconding? Councillor Chair Pauling. So then open for discussion. Anyone? So Councillor Burns. Oh, Councillor Robinson. Sorry, second. Sorry, hold on 1 second. Just remembering my processes here. So Councillor Robinson, would you like to speak now or at the end?
No, it's just a brief word and saying thanks for bringing this to us today, and I promise I will keep everyone informed as things go along. And that's just confirming that we're aiming to have pre-workshop meetings and post-workshop briefings. And I hope I summarise all of that enough for everybody to understand. And I also commit to work with Chair Pauling as well, who was, quite strongly involved in all this. So, and of course others. So thank you so much for bringing it. Cheers.
So Councillor Burns. Oh, you want to speak now? Yep.
Hey, look, awesome to see this getting the energy and the boots on the ground to get this work done. So just big acknowledgement that's happening. Great to see that the workshops are almost underway with the stakeholders and that the runanga one's already happened. So really thankful for that. I just wish, and I'm hoping that we, when we get to September, we've got a really good document that we can all be proud of. I'm sure we will. So that's all I really want to say. Let's go. Let's get the work underway, and looking forward to connecting into all those different elements that we need to. So kia ora, thank you.
Councillor Burns?
Yeah, thanks very much. Look, I don't need to go over the past 2 years, including resigning as the chair of the Biodiversity Biosecurity Committee. I've made myself pretty clear on the position to date. I am somewhat heartened by the involvement of Councillor Robinson and especially Chair Pauling through the Mayoral Forum, Biodiversity Champions, etc. And I'm hoping when Nook has the opportunity to actually turn up, he too will see the value of this project and ensure that information is passed through and the likes of it. I thought there was a insightful Alex mentioning the positives, I guess, out of the fact that there has been some work by our TAs across the region in biodiversity, which is very pleasing. I would say, though, let's not race. I, for one, want to see it done, but I don't want more speed, less haste. I want to make sure that everyone gets their opportunity to be involved with this. I think one of the benefits of this original one, which I'm happy to loan you, Councillor Kōraka, it's a good document, was the huge investment by the community. And the only other thing I would say is, should I start writing up my CV for the role of the Regional Biodiversity Coordinator now? Thank you.
Councillor Edge.
Thanks, Chair. Interesting proposition, Councillor Burns. Yeah, look, it's good to see that some significant progress is being made. The timeline's incredibly tight, given as Councillor Burns mentioned, that the last triennium had it as one of its top of its agenda. Okay, things have happened, and it's really annoying that we're racing to the line. But it will even be more annoying if we cannot adopt this before this triennium ends. So I just give my wish to the team working on this at the moment that they do every effort to get that sorted by early August and ensure that the external providers deliver for them on that as well, and that we have something really proud to announce prior to us departing.
Councillor Kōrako.
Kia ora. Yeah, just tautoko most of the comments. And if I do need any information, Councillor Burns, I'll pull the chain. But thank you anyway for your offer. Kia ora.
Kia ora. So I would just really like to say I'm really pleased to see this come to the table at this stage and have mapped out how we are going to achieve a document come September for us to adopt. It's really exciting to see, and I'm really pleased to just see how I'm looking forward to seeing how the workshops and the stakeholder engagement plans out, because that is such an important and interesting part of what builds up these types of documents. It's not all in-house, it's all the voices we get from outside as well. So kia ora, we'll just put this to the vote. All those who are in favour, please say aye. Any against? No. So that's carried. Thank you. So moving on then to item 9.3. And so this is the Central Government Update and Submissions Report. I have Cecilia Ellis, who's our Principal Strategy Advisor, coming to the table to present this to us. Kia ora, Cecilia. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou. So this is the standing information update to the Committee on Central Government Consultations. So I'll take it as read, but I'll just make a couple of points today. Just since the February meeting, there was a submission on the Local Government Water Services Bill. Also, since the paper was drafted, there's been a consultation released on the proposed environmental wastewater performance standards. So staff are recommending that we will submit on this, and further information will be coming on that, including some initial summary and high-level points, and then a draft submission further on for councillor feedback. And just the other thing to note is that we've also heard back about being heard on the Resource Management Consenting and Other Amendments Bill, aka RM Bill number 2, and that's going to be happening next week. And so I'll just leave it there. Yeah.
So can I ask, do we have any questions for Cecilia? Any questions, councillors? No.
Just say, I think, Cecilia, thank you. It's a great summary of what's going on, and it's always good to know what's going on in the background. I don't officially have full eyes on all these things, so this is a good document for us. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it gives a sense of the scale of the work that there is to do on all of this and how much change that we're looking at. It doesn't seem to have slowed up for some number of years, in fact, but it is really good to see it in this format, all collated in one place. So thank you. Councillor Robinson.
My comments are just regarding the consultation that we didn't submit on, the MPI one, which I can understand that it comes across as it's not a core function or a core submission point. However, I feel like I disagree on that one, because considering we're working on the Coastal Environment Plan coming up, and that is currently still in our scope to look at Policy 11 of the Coastal Policy Statement, it looks at council's ability to control certain things. I know not fisheries, but when fisheries is looking at changing camera footage availability and removing, in some cases, certain restrictions on fisheries within our 12 nautical mile area, it will cause some ramifications for some of our further work program. And the intersect is actually quite apparent when you actually look at the two together, and that's what I was trying to see if staff could actually provide some, perspective on that. So, although I'm just wondering why it wasn't given a little bit more consideration into submission. I will do one personally on a different level, but I'm just wondering why council was so opposed to actually considering doing one. Please.
Yeah, so staff did review the proposals, and it was just, felt that it was best placed to direct our commentary through, sort of the resource management changes and other amendments that were, within sort of our direct roles and responsibilities.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. However, that submission would have actually complemented the other. So it would have proven our, our points made in our submission on the RM reform for that particular part, and we said we actually opposed it. This would also have backed it. I'm just a bit disappointed, really. Which is what I want to add to, if you don't mind. Is it okay if I just add one comment to say that further future submissions that come through, could at least council be provided with some sort of oversight to say yes or no, rather than it being sort of a poke the stick and see if staff are willing to, or suggesting that we do. I just really wish we could see some oversight of what's coming up that may or may not be relevant. That's just my point.
To some extent, I mean, this is the oversight. We are seeing that through here. But in theory, this is due in on the 28th of March 25. So I guess if enough in council feel that this one's actually really key, that we could then make a change. But Catherine, you'd like to?
I mean, the question around why staff recommended not to submit was taken back a second time, and staff had another look at it, and we provided some advice about why that was. I haven't got that advice in front of me, so I can't. But what we did look at it a second time.
The reason being is it's on this paper because I asked and probed. Right. So had I not done that, it would not be on here. Okay. So what I'm saying is just oversight of what's coming up and whether or not to. That's all I ask. That comes to us. Sorry.
Okay. Chair Pauling.
Look, I agree. This is the oversight here. It's much better that the process we've got now, so that's in here for councillors. The other oversight is that things do come to me, Genevieve, and staff tell me reasons why they might or might not, and then I do give them feedback. So just so you know, there is a bit of oversight from me as well, but I don't know everything. So, it's not a perfect system, but I think what we've got here in our documents and then through this S&P committee is a much better process than we've had before. So I really acknowledge the work we're doing. We're not always going to get everything, and of course, at the end of the day, staff have to prioritise and do things. And I think keep doing what you're doing in terms of raising issues with staff so they can have a look at it, and then I get that feedback too. Okay. So that helps. So thank you.
That's good.
Right. Thank you. Okay, so no more questions? Nope. So Celia, thank you. Can leave the table. So if can bring up the recommendations. And do I have a mover? Councillor Edge, seconder. Councillor Sunkel, thank you. So open to discussion. Do I have Well, the mover, would you like to speak to this? No. Seconder? No. Anyone else? No. So all those who are in favour, then put the motion out. All those who are in favour, please say aye. Any against? No. So that's carried. Thank you. Okay, so now we just to let you know the next meeting, that's going to be on the 2nd of April, Wednesday, 2nd of April. And then Mihi Whakakapi for closing.
So who did the Karakia this one? Oh, I can do it. Oh, good. Oh, kia ora koutou. Nei rā te mihi kia koutou. Ai tēnei ahiahi mō tō tātou mahi i tēnei kōmiti. Te kōmiti rautaki me te kaupapa here. Ai nei te mihi, nei te mihi, nei te mihi. Ai he karakia whakakapi o tātou nei hui. Kia tau, nā manakitanga o nā me karo ki runga ki tēnā o tātou. Kua māhia te hua mā kiiki, kia toi te reo, kia toi te mana, kia toi te aroha, tūturu whakamoa kia tīna. Haumi e hui e tāi ki e.